Chapter 74, Burning the Diamond Sect Master 2. Hence, Xu Qing raised his brows and directly kicked out. With a boom, cracks appeared on the secret door, but it didn't shatter. Xu Qing let out a soft cry of surprise as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Cracking sounds then rang out from his body, and the Kui shadow behind him suddenly materialized. As he silently roared, it fused with his right hand, transforming into a full-powered punch. With a boom, the hidden door shattered into pieces, revealing a dark room. There weren't many items inside, only a palm-sized cloth bag. Xu Qing was a little surprised and wanted to grab it. However, at that moment, an intense light emitted from the bottom of the sack. Streaks of light drew complicated patterns on the ground. As they shone, they formed winged blades that spiraled into the air, blocking the hand he grabbed. Xu Qing immediately retracted his hand and looked at the cloth bag within the wine blades. A strange glint appeared in his eyes. He felt that this thing must be a treasure, so he glanced at the picture formed by the light under the cloth bag. "What is this?" Xu Qing frowned. After sensing the spirit energy fluctuations on it, he let out a cold snort. He then took out his two remaining black pills and crushed them. Instantaneously, anomalous substances erupted and gushed in from all directions, engulfing the secret chamber. The pattern that lit up on the ground flickered intensely at this moment, but it couldn't stop the corrosion. Eventually, it dimmed and was extinguished amidst cracking sounds. Xu Qing didn't hesitate to grab the sack and leave the treasure vault. Xu Qing's expression was ice cold as he looked at the Diamond Sect, which was currently in a state of chaos and filled with whales. It was filled with anomalous substances, and poisonous wind and flames were rising from it. His flight talisman flashed as he soared into the air, wanting to leave. He was very clear that even if the sect didn't have an ancestor now, he had only gained the advantage of a surprise attack. If this continued, there would be danger. His goal in coming here this time wasn't simply to kill but to destroy the Diamond Sect's mountain gate. He wanted to snatch as much as he could. Now that he had achieved his goal, his speed erupted as he rushed toward the sky. However, at that moment, a furious roar rang out. Within the fog, the sect master's hair was disheveled as he rapidly rushed toward him. Xu Qing was in midair. He lowered his head, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. The seventh level of the mountains and seas art erupted from his body, and the Kui shadow appeared behind him. He then threw a punch toward the incoming sect master. A heaven-shattering sound rang out. The sect master roared as he retreated a few steps. Just when he was about to continue, a purple saber shadow formed behind Xu Qing in the next instant. The heavenly saber descended. It directly slashed at the Diamond Sect's sect master. The expression of the sect master changed drastically, and his body suddenly retreated, returning to the poisonous wind and anomalous substances in the fall. At the same time, the purple blade light also chased after him. Xu Qing didn't give chase. His gaze flickered as he immediately retreated, transforming into a beam of light that shot into the sky, heading toward the distant thunder. The instant he left, 7 to 8 figures rushed out of the fog that the sect master had retreated into. Each of them attacked fiercely with all their might. The power of this attack was so great that it seemed to cause the air to explode. A thunderous boom filled the sky, and a depression was formed, comparable to the power of a foundation building. If Xu Qing hadn't left and continued to pursue, he would have been blasted into pieces. As for the 7 or 8 figures, they were all old men. At that moment, their faces were all pale and they spat out mouthfuls of blood. It was obvious that the attack earlier had been completed through their cooperation and secret arts. Now that they saw Xu Qing escaping, they hesitated on whether they should chase after him. 7 guardians, don't chase after them. Within the fog, the sect master staggered out. One of his arms was broken, and as blood dripped down, his face was pale and his body was on the verge of collapse. That thief is too cautious. To think that he didn't pursue me. Right now, our main focus is to disperse the poisonous wind and anomalous substances from the mountain gate as soon as possible and wait for the ancestor to return. The sect master was filled with grievances and gritted his teeth. He had risked being injured earlier to lure the other party, but he had failed. The 7 or 8 old men fell silent. Someone stepped forward to support the sect master. Looking at the chaotic sect, their expressions were blank. They sighed and could only try their best to disperse the chaos. Time flowed, and very soon, a day passed. When dusk arrived, More than half of the Diamond Sect's poison and anomalous substances had finally dissipated. The former consumed a large amount of the disciples' wine element spales, while the latter forced them to crush their spirit coins and dilute them with pure spirit energy. The consumption was tremendous. As for the entire sect, it was in ruins. Even the main hall at the top of the mountain was in ruins. Most of the buildings had collapsed and there were traces of fire everywhere. If they wanted to recover, the consumption would be huge. What was in even more serious condition were the disciples of the Diamond Sect. The anomalous substances in the bodies of these people were all very dense. At that moment, most of their bodies were greenish-black and they needed a large number of white pills or even clear dust pills to neutralize them. The Diamond Sect's sect master and a few protectors were all exhausted and aggrieved. In the distant horizon, a rainbow arrived. The Diamond Sect's ancestor had returned. He was also in a sorry state. There were many injuries on his body and his disheveled hair suppressed his anger. After escaping from the Forbidden Zone, he had decided that he would do whatever it took to kill that kid. When he saw the mountain gate in the distance, he was stunned for a moment in midair. He instantly sped up and approached it. He lowered his head above the mountain gate and stared blankly at the ruins beneath his feet. Ancestor. When the disciples of the Diamond Sect saw the figure of the ancestor, they immediately cried out, "Ancestor, that kid took advantage of your absence and caused chaos in our sect. Our disciples suffered heavy casualties. Old ancestor, our treasure vault was also robbed clean by that bastard. Those he couldn't take away were tainted by the anomalous substances. Ancestor, that kid is too inhumane. Many of our disciples are poison and it's hard to neutralize." Only the sect master, guardians, and the others remained silent. Hearing the cries of the disciples, the Diamond Sect's ancestor looked at the broken mountain gate, at the miserable disciples, and then at the sect master who had lost his arm and the injured guardians. His body slowly trembled. His face turned from green to white, then from white to red and finally to extreme green. His body staggered and he couldn't help but spit out a large mouthful of blood. As his breathing hastened, he clenched his fists tightly. His eyes were bloodshot as though he wanted to eat someone. He then let out a mournful roar toward the sky. "I'm going to kill you." This roar reverberated in all directions like thunder. But it couldn't reach the location of Adler City's teleportation array. In Adler City, Xu Qing stood in line beside the teleportation array. In front of him was a huge teleportation array. This formation was constructed on top of a magic altar in the shape of an octagon. Countless runes were engraved on it, and it was extremely complicated. Every time it shone, it would radiate boundless light with an imposing aura. There were also some guards with extraordinary cultivation bases in the surroundings who coldly looked at the people queuing up. Their gazes were ice-cold, as though they would be instantly killed if they had the slightest intention of going against the rules. Very soon, as the person in front disappeared, it was Xu Qing's turn. He then walked toward the altar where the teleportation array was located. When he stepped onto the altar and entered the complicated teleportation array, Xu Qing turned and looked at the world he had lived in for many years. At that moment, the sun was setting and the afterglow spilled onto the ground. The July wind brought along heat as it blew over, blowing the hair in front of Xu Qing's eyes, allowing him to see this world more clearly. He looked in the direction of the ruins of the city, then at the scavenger campsite. Finally, he coldly glanced at the Diamond Sect's location. "We'll meet again," Xu Qing mumbled. His gaze grew colder and colder as the teleportation array beneath his feet shone brighter and brighter. This lasted until the sea of light erupted and drowned everything, including Xu Qing's figure. In the next instant, when the light from the teleportation array dissipated, Xu Qing, who was inside, disappeared.